Welcome, good morning, and we're welcome from sunny Brussels today on behalf of Solar Power Europe. My name is Rafael Rossi, and I'm policy analyst at Solar Power Europe, and I will be moderating this first section of the day 2 of the Solar Market Outlook Launch Conference. So today we take on from what you've learned from yesterday, and we have some deep dive into some of the most interesting solar markets around the world. So today we have a number of exciting sessions ahead of us that I very much look forward to. And we start off with the first section focusing on China. Today's first session is called China, a new next growth phase. And we're glad to have the participation of CPIA, the Chinese PV Industry Association. Just an outlook of the day. After the coffee break, we will have a session on India. So looking at whether 100 gigawatts will be achieved on time with the participation of the National Solar Energy Federation of India. And then after lunch, we have 2 more sessions, one on Brazil in collaboration with AB Solar, the Brazilian Solar PV and Energy Association. And finally, the last session about the United States. So this said, today I'm really glad to have with us Jialin, who is a senior researcher at the China Photovoltaic Industry Association, CPIA, who will share with us these insights about the current status and the future outlook of the Chinese solar market. I don't want to take more of time for introduction, so please, the floor is yours, and you can start with your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rafael, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jialin with the China Photovoltaic Industry Association. It is a great privilege to participate in this online meeting, sharing thoughts and sparking ideas with professionals in the PV industry globally. Thanks to the organizer again for this perfect opportunity to learn new insights with all of you. The title of my presentation today is Development Situation and Outlook of China's Photovoltaic Industry. So the next page, please allow me to make a very brief introduction about our association. China Photovoltaic Industry Association, brief as CPIA, was founded in 2014 in Beijing as an A-level national association with approval of the Ministry of Civil Affairs. CPIA's member formed only on voluntary basis that include business, government institutions, social organizations, and individuals in the research and development, manufacturing, education and services of photovoltaic products, equipment, supplies, and applicants. The CPIA is a national industry and non-profit social organization. And also, CPIA is a co-founder and a permanent member of the Global Solar Council, with an international non-profit association of national, regional, and international association in solar energy and world-leading corporation. Okay. Next page. Now, about today's topic, I would like to illustrate my view from 2 aspects. First, the development situation of China's photovoltaic at present. Second is the development prospect. Before the main point, I would like to share the great achievements that China PV has made in recent years. China tops the world in terms of the new added PV installation for 7 consecutive years, and the cumulative PV installation for 5 consecutive years. Polysilicon production and module productions in China also ranks the first in the world for 9 and 13 consecutive years, respectively. In recent years, China is the largest PV market around the world, whereas in 2019, the new added PV installation in China reached 30.1 GW, which was 32% less than 2018. This is the second year of newly installed capacity declined. The cumulative installed capacity reached 204.3 GW by the end of 2019, representing 17.1% year-over-year growth. In terms of the market segmentations, utility-scale projects added 17.91 GW, year-on-year decrease of 23.1%, of which 10.18 GW was newly installed in fourth quarter, which was 1.32 times the total installed capacity in the first 3 quarters. The distributed solar power plant contributed 12.19 GW, a year-on-year decrease of 41.8%. Well, the development of the residential PV market exceeded expectations, with newly installed capacity of 4.18 GW, supporting the distributed plants. In 2019, the utility scale accounted for about 60% of total installation, and the distributed scale accounted for 40%. Residential sector accounts for 1/3 of the distributed scale. Next, I'm going to talk about the manufacturing part. About the manufacturing situation in 2019, polysilicon output in China was approximately 342,000 tons, equals to 32% year-over-year growth. About the silicon wafer, the production of silicon wafer reached 134.7 GW in 2019, about 25.8% year-over-year growth. The solar cells output in 2019 was about 110.3 GW. This is a growth rate of 29.8%. And the modules output in 2019 was about 98.6 GW, a 17% year-over-year growth. Next, about the development situation in the first quarter of the 2020. The newly added PV installation in China was 3.95 GW in the first quarter, about 24.04% decline year-over-year. In terms of the market segmentation, utility scale projects newly installed 2.23 GW. Distributed solar power plants newly installed 1.72 GW. That include 258.9 MW residential project. The residential PV installation by month may have illustrated the growth trend. In January, there was no effect of the coronavirus disease. The residential PV installed 129.9 MW. In February, the coronavirus disease outbreak. there was only 10.7 megawatt installed in residential PV sector. Well, the utility-scale projects and the distributed projects applications and constructions were basically suspended. The epidemic made a negative influence in February. The operation rate of PV enterprises in polysilicon and wafer, cells, and modules were lower than before. And the epidemic bring many problems such as construction time delay, shortage of talents, logistic cost rise, tension supply of raw materials, and uncertainty of foreign trade. The epidemic in March was gradually both under control in China, and the situation of work resumption in April was greatly improved. In March, with the impact of the epidemic gradually faded, the residential PV installation was 118.3 megawatts, and the utility projects and the distributed project construction resumed gradually. In April, the residential PV installation reached 402.6 megawatts. The installation index was 55.5% higher than the total installation of the first 3 months. In May, the installation amount reached 596.4 megawatts, about 48% higher than the previous month. Based on this, the second quarter is decisive to determine the development in the second half of the year. Next, I want to talk about the policies. In 2020, the core policies fall on 4 aspects: the binding, the parity, residential PV, and the subsidies. The general framework is consistent with that of 2019, with the parity projects ahead of the binding projects. Binding projects application for projects need to be submitted to the NEA before the June 15th. The binding index is expected to be issued by the end of this June. About parity projects, application for projects needs to be submitted to the NEA by the end of April, and the NEA will display the result in public. About residential PV, grid connection of residential PV needs to finish by the end of 2020. Those allowed to get subsidies begin at January 1st, 2020. About the subsidy, the sum of subsidy total is 1.5 billion yuan RMB, with 1 billion yuan for the binding projects and 0.5 billion yuan for the residential projects. In 2020, the feed-in tariff guidance prices for utilities PV projects in the 3 resources areas is 35 cents, 40 cents, and 49 cents. That means 12.5%, 11.1%, and 10.9% decrease year on year. The final binding price will no longer higher than the guidance price. Well, the subsidy for the industry and the commercial distributed PV is 5 cents, 50% decrease year on year. And the subsidy for the residential PV is 8 cents per kWh. According to the policy, proportion of the utilities PV will increase this year. The distributed PV will have a slim chance to enter the subsidy directory of bidding projects, and the residential PV is expected to reach 7 GW in 2020. Next, due to the effects of coronavirus disease, 2020 bring too much uncertainty. Well, the opportunities and the challenges coexist. About opportunities. First, the world will increase investment in renewable energy to boost economic growth. Second, the following prices are expected to stimulate global PV markets. And third, the market structure of manufacturing has become more stable. About the challenges, the overseas market after the epidemic is crucial demand. Second, the increased pressure on cost-backed production capacity. The third is about unclear domestic policy on projects extensions. Now, I want to talk about the second part of my today's topic. It's the development prospect. According IEA's prospect, renewables are said to be the only energy resources that will grow in 2020. Government can still use clean energy technology as the core force of economic recovery, including renewable energy, energy efficiency improvement, battery technology, hydrogen energy, and carbon capture technology, etc. And investment in this field can create employment opportunities, improve economic competitiveness, and guide the world is moving towards more resilience and a cleaner energy future. With the cost of PV power generation has further decreased, the PV market has a bright future. About the forecast about the PV market. To forecast the PV market, I think it is the most difficult work all over the world. Different agencies have different views. I noticed that the new released GMO report medium scenario that new global installed capacity will decrease by 4% to 112 GW in 2020. And many different agencies have different forecasts. In January, we expected that the global installed capacity in 2020 is going to reach between 130 to 140 gigawatts. But the coronavirus outbreak unexpectedly. Due to the impact of the epidemic, we lowered the expectation in 2020 to 110 to 135 gigawatts. The low scenario is based on the impact of the epidemic continues, and the resumption of work is slow, and it slightly affects through the second half of the year. The optimistic scenario is based on the impacts of the epidemic situation continue to improve and subsided in the third quarter. In the first and two quarters, installed capacity was affected, but in the third quarter resumed power generation construction, and in the fourth quarter reached new high. About China PV market, We expected that the installation will reach between 32 to 45 gigawatt. The previous version was 35 to 45 due to the impact of epidemic was revised and lowered the expectations. Affected by the epidemic, some bidding projects carried over in 2019 failed to complete in time, and the grid connection intensified in the second quarter. Intensified resumption of work in various palaces. Under the stimulus of the pre-installation, the bidding project, residential joint promotes a substantial increase in installed capacity, but some bidding projects have been abandoned. The domestic policies on project extension is not released now. In the third quarter, the bidding project in 2020 is in the early stage, and the industrial and commercial distribution can connect it to the grid, and the residential sector is expected to have a gigawatt-level grid connection every month. And in the fourth quarter, some provinces and cities require bidding projects to be fully connected to the grid by the end of 2020, with parity projects and residential projects which is expected to reach new high. As the cost of solar PV and other new energy resources continue to decline, the business model of solar PV storage application continue to mature. The bottleneck of power grid consumption is elevated, and the development space of solar PV and other new energy markets will continue to increase. Over the course of 2019 and 2020, China's PV industry management policies underwent major changes. The overall goal of the policies will reduce dependence on subsidies, and eventually began a subsidy-free era due to the start on January 2021. This development laid the foundation of the forthcoming 15th five-year plan. With the diversification of the application market, new solar PV installation will rise steadily during 2021 to 2025. It means in the 15th five-year plan period, China's installation is expecting reach above 50 gigawatts. This year is a crucial one for China's PV power generation to enter an area of parity. The management model is similar to 2019. Meanwhile, with the development in technology and the decline of initial investment, and unfinished bidding projects will be completed in 2020. It is expected that China's PV market will recover by the end of the year. PV power generation projects will still adopt the management mode of the giving priority to parity projects, and the implementation bidding for projects requires state subsidies. Because of 2020 is the last year with the state subsidies. Except the residential PV project, the enthusiasm for enterprises to invest in solar system will increase significantly. And the Chinese PV industry will continue to strengthen in its technological innovation and further accelerate the pace of upgrading, reducing costs, and increasing efficiency. Another new trend is about solar PV combined with storage. In the last 3 years, the storage grows dramatically from 2% to 35% growth. And the solar PV plus storage could increase peaking adjustment capacity, the peaking adjust capacity, enhance the frequency modulation capacity, and increase the consumption of renewable energy. And that's what I want to share about today's topic. And thank you very much. Thanks all of you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I think we got quite a number of interesting insights that we can discuss. We have a few minutes for the Q&A. So I invite all participants, first of all, to pose questions. You can find the chat box on the right-hand side of the screen. And maybe to kick off the conversation, maybe 1 or 2 questions from my side. So one of the key takeaways that we learned from the GMO 2020 that we launched yesterday is that indeed China still plays a pivotal role in the global PV market, and that the Chinese performance inevitably affects the global PV performance. So taking this into consideration, in your presentation you mentioned that yes, the 2020 installation levels could range between 32 and 45, but still it's quite difficult, as you mentioned, to understand where we're heading. So in your view, what are the next steps and drivers that could lead to what we at least expected to be the installation of 2020, so somewhere around 40 gigas? What would be these next steps and drivers? Thanks.
Okay. That's about currently Chinese PV market is still driven on policies and markets. And in 2020 is the last year that China PV has with the state-owned subsidies. So in 2021, and there is going to be a parity area. So many investment in this year. The enthusiasm investment in PV should be on this year. So, and the second is about the cost, with the efficiency rising, and the cost of the PV system is decreasing, and so it's benefit for the investment. And the third is about the building projects in 2019. Some projects didn't finish in 2019 and then transferred to 2020. So about the 3 reasons, we expect that China's PV market will reach higher than the previous years.
Yes, speaking of the auction in June 2019, indeed, you mentioned that this project needs to be finished by the end of this year, and indeed will provide us quite strong driver for this year capacity installations. But considering the COVID-19 effect, do you think there is a risk that some of these projects are left unfinished and abandoned? Is this a concrete risk?
Yes, it's really a risk about that. At the very beginning of this year, we expected China's market is going to be 35 to 45 gigawatts installation, but due to the impacts of the coronavirus, we lower our expectations. In the last few months, in March and in April, the influence of the coronavirus is decreased, and the China controlled the virus well, and so we expectedly China will have a good prospect in this year, but the coronavirus is completely new in this year, and so it's bring too much uncertainty about to the market. So maybe if the coronavirus disease outbreak again in China, maybe some projects may delayed, and just as the previous. So that's a risk about the really a risk.
Yes, indeed. And speaking of Corona, you showed in the slides that indeed February has been the lowest level of installations. That's been the highest impact month in terms of installation residential, but I believe also utility scale. So in your view, and sorry, maybe it's a bit of a crystal ball question, but if a new second wave of this pandemic would occur, do you think we would go down to these levels, or will be mitigated to some extent?
Sorry?
So my question is, if we have a second wave of COVID, do you think we will go back to these low levels, or something better than we had?
If we go, if the coronavirus outbreaks again, and the installation may be lower than we expected, but I don't think it's going to go back to the February. And in February, the disease outbreak is one reason, and another reason is about traditionally February is the lowest, but this year, February is beyond we expected. So that's we think is too much is about the coronavirus.
Okay, thank you. And then maybe going back to the forecast that CPIA has provided, you have two scenarios for the next 4 years, and for 2020 they range from 32 to 45 gigawatts under the low and high scenario. My question is, what are the factors that could lead the market to go in either of the two directions? So in other words, what are the factors that could lead to the lowest scenario, and what are the drivers that could lead to the highest scenario?
Okay. In the first quarter, it's affected by the epidemic. So some building projects carried out in 2019 failed to complete in time. And in the second quarter, the intensified resumption of works various places. Under the stimulation about the deadline and the building projects, residential joint promotes the substantial increase in installed capacity. So the domestic policies on projects extension is not released. So we cannot know how much projects maybe is going to be abandoned. So if the policies agree to extension the projects previously, so maybe it's going to is optimistic. It's going to reach the high scenario. That's based on the policies.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned that there was supposed to be an auction in March 2020, and this has been postponed. But so the new date is still unclear. There's a lot of uncertainty right now. Do you think that the auction will take place during this year, or maybe rather shifted to next year? Do you have any insights on this point?
In my personal view, it's about China is transferring the high-speed development to high-quality development. So the high-speed development is not really pursued. So in 2021, in China's market is going to enter the parity area. So if the project could not finish in 2020, in 2021 there will be no subsidies.
Okay, so there is indeed a concrete risk that the project don't get remuneration for their installation, despite they've been part of the auction. One question looking maybe at the longer term. You talked about residential, you talked about utility scale. In the future, which one do you think will take the lion's share of installation? Will it continue to be very large scale project like in the past? Will the distributed installation take a more important role in the future? What do you think on this?
Basically, is the utilities will grow much. So we expected that the residential part is going to be 7 gigawatt only. So that's based on this year's subsidy. It's 0.5 billion years amount subsidies support the residential part. So based on this, and the subsidy is about 8 cent RMB per kilowatt hours. Calculated is about 7 gigawatt installation. So the 1 billion yuan subsidy supports the utilities and commercial distributed projects. So the utilities is going to be grows much.
Yes, indeed. One question maybe that we learned from our research when compiling the information from the GMO 2020, we learned that there are many projects at the provincial level that are being accumulated. But could you elaborate on what's happening at the provincial level and how does it fit with the indication from the central government? The reason I'm asking is because we've learned that the National Energy Administration mentioned a limit of 48 gigawatts due to grid constraints. However, we believe that from the provinces, the projects are in a pipeline that is larger than 48 gigawatts. So how to reconcile this provincial versus central administration initiatives?
In China, the utilities have 3 resources zones. So distributed in different provinces. So the different provinces based on their provincial situation, they set their goals about and they participate in the bidding program first, and then report to the National Energy Administration.
We have a question from an attendee that wants to get a clarification whether is it the case that subsidies for residential PV projects will be available post 2021 and if yes, in subsequent years. So the grid parity will be only for utility scale, non-residential projects, whereas residential PV still will be eligible to subsidies. Is that correct?
Sorry.
So the speaker is asking, the attendee is asking whether subsidies will be available for residential PV post 2021.
Currently, there's no policies talking about there will be subsidies in 2021. So we just think it's going to be no subsidies in 2021 completely. It's because China is going to enter the parity area.
Okay, thank you. That's I think it's interesting actually, and good to point this out. I think we're approaching the end of the session. So maybe what I suggest is that maybe we have one last question that addresses the longer term view. You mentioned in your presentation that in 2024, we could reach 80 gigawatts. 2025, we could reach 80 gigawatts a year in an optimistic scenario. Do you think this is achievable, and what do you think are the barriers to this level of deployment?
That's because I think that should be based on the technology improvement. So in China, the mono and the multi cells, the efficiency raised very much in 2019. The mono efficiency raised to 22.3%, and the multi reached 19.3%. With the efficiency here and the more development, the cost will reduce, and then the same amount of money, the cost reduce and more installations. And another reason, optimistic view is about the application parts. With the diversification of the application markets, and the new PV installations will rise steadily.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we are approaching the end of the session, so I would like to thank you very much again once more for sharing the insights with us. I think the Chinese market is very exciting. Lots of uncertainty at the moment, and indeed the strongest driver to the global PV market. So something definitely to look forward to discover what's happening next. In the meantime, I would also like to thank all attendees for staying with us this morning, this session. Now we will have a coffee break. And after the coffee break, as said, we have another session on India, looking at whether the government will be able to achieve 100 gigawatts in time. They have an internal target of reaching 100 gigawatts already in 2 years. This seems ambitious, so get there to discuss with us and with the National Energy Association of India, NSCFI. After the second session, we have a lunch break, and after the lunch break, we have 2 more sessions on Brazil with AB Solar and on the United States with the participation of Wood Mackenzie. During the breaks, just a reminder, you can also go to the coffee corner. You can find it on the left. You will see different options, and so I invite you to explore the various rooms that you can check. You can also share your audio and video in the coffee corner, where you can talk with other participants, and also invite you to have a look at the expo and the networking area if you haven't done so. So with this, I would like to close the conversation. So thanks again, Jialin, and a nice continuation of the conference to everybody. You can see the post on the right-hand side, where you can find the link for downloading the GMO 2020 and the link to join the other session, the coffee break, and so on. This said, thanks again, and have a nice rest of the day. Goodbye.
Okay, thank you, Vlad. Thanks to the organizers. Thanks all of you. Bye.